The first question we wanted to ask you was about homogeneous skylines, or the risk of creating skylines that look the same from city to city or country to country. What steps should cities be taking? What steps are you taking?
I don't think that every building is a landmark building, and I don't think that every building should be a gateway building. So we try very hard to make sure that our skyline, if you will, is well composed. So those key projects, or those key sites that warrant taller buildings, should have more exuberant tops. But not every building should. And not that I'm critical of cities that do have every building screaming for and competing for attention. But it's just not us. It's just not Toronto.
That's interesting. If you could select a major tall building design, construction, operation, management, research topic that you think needed more work, what would it be and why?
Well, certainly something that I'm interested in getting involved with in my tenure here at the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is that urban habitat aspect of it. And certainly how buildings meet the street, and what their role is, not just in the city, but also in terms of quality of life.
Yeah, speaking of public space or the public realm, tell us about the POPS program.
We've added 1 million square feet to the downtown in the past 10 years of privately owned public space, and that's what the acronym stands for.
Yeah, just tell us briefly how it works. These are privately owned spaces?
That's right, and I often say it's a win-win, right? Often how it works is through discussions and negotiations with a developer. These spaces are sought by ourselves, and often are achieved through extra height. So the developer gets extra height through the process. So we are actually quite clever, I think, in targeting these open spaces. What is needed? First of all, is an open space needed on a block? And if so, then what type of open space? Is it a plaza? Is it a parkette? Is it a pedestrian connection linking two parks? And thinking about also the park network that exists in the public realm.
So Toronto's, as you alluded to earlier, now one of the tall building hotbeds of the world.
Yeah, we've written tall building guidelines that talk about how towers should be spaced. If you look at Manhattan, if you look at some of those key or golden apartments that were built in the 60s with a sea of greenery around them, not perhaps the stuff that urban designers like to see, but the value of those units are actually well maintained because they know in perpetuity that they will have that breathing room behind them. So that's what we're trying to do with our point towers that we see in Toronto. We still have a podium that reinforces the street and goes lot line to lot line. But then above that, we do want towers to be slim, they can be taller, but to have that quality of life in that breathing room so that one knows that you will not be staring at a blank wall.
At the same time as you've seen this Manhattanization, this densification, there's been a flare-up of kind of an anti-urban sentiment in the area, and there's been continued sprawl, suburban development. Have you noticed this division getting worse, and how would you reconcile this division, which to some extent exists in every city?
We have the provincial government, like your state governments, that have put a green belt around the greater area of Toronto. And that has actually helped stop the sprawl, largely in areas that are outside of our jurisdiction, the neighboring suburbs. But that puts the first ring around it. And then our official plan speaks to targeting growth in only 25% of the city of Toronto. Because we, like Chicago, have a lot of single-family neighborhoods, and we value those neighborhoods. And so obviously we're not targeting growth there. So it gives us a limited amount of area that we can grow.
Anything we haven't brought up?
How do we intersperse tall buildings, whether it's in Toronto or Chicago or Mumbai or Sao Paulo? How do we do that as best as we can so that we can improve the quality of life for people around the world?
Yeah, the green belt you mentioned is a great step, but then people might leapfrog it too. There ends up being development outside of the green belt as well. So,
but when you do traverse it, then we're getting satellite smaller towns that are developing with their own unique infrastructure, their own little mini downtowns, their own access to commuter lines and transit, so that they themselves become sustainable communities because they're so far out that you're forced to do that.
Mm.